Damaged Defenders by Sherza. Chapter 43. Tyr and Thor. Tyr of Asgard had seen much in his nearly 5 millennia of life. He had, as little more than a stripling lad, fought side by side with the then prince Odin Borson in the last great battle before Thanos the Mad Titan had been forever exiled from the shores of 6 of the 9 realms. At one point in that battle, they'd ended up back-to-back fighting for their lives. From that time forward, Odin had trusted him as he had trusted few others, enough so that when Bor had died and Odin assumed the throne, he had named Tyr his general. But Tyr, thanks to that long association, was more aware of Odin's faults than most. He was also pragmatic enough to admit they existed, and do what he could to mitigate them. Unfortunately, even as Odin's general, that hadn't amounted to much. He was not blind, nor stupid. He had known that Frigga had not been with child before the appearance of Loki. He had also known that the orphans of the battles against the Jotuns had all been found homes, primarily because he'd been the one to ensure the children of the men who had died under his command would be well taken care of. That had left very few sources for the mystery child. Unfortunately, Tyr had not been the only one to put the pieces together. More than one of the soldiers from that last campaign had figured it out as well. Unlike those soldiers, Tyr had done his utmost to not hold his true parentage against the child. Loki was an innocent and did not deserve to be treated ill for things he'd had no part in, nor memory of. Sadly, more than one of those other soldiers had been quite ready to hold Loki's parentage against him, especially in the face of Odin's apparent permissiveness of ill treatment aimed Loki's direction. Tyr honestly had no clue as to the full truth of the events that had occurred before Loki's apparent death. That something had gone wrong somewhere had been pretty clear, but Tyr hadn't known most of the details. He only knew that Thor had been banished, Odin had succumbed to the Odin sleep, Loki had assumed the throne, and then all hell had broken loose. Nor had he been present when the Midgardians arrived with Thor and Loki and Odin passed sentence, though he had heard rumors about what had been revealed. He did not, however, trust rumors as a general rule. As such, he was willing to withhold judgment until he found out what had happened from Thor and Loki's own mouths. Clearly, Odin had been at least partially at fault for the mess, and had done something, or been about to do something, that would make matters worse. It was the only explanation for both why Frigga had slapped Odin down, and her comment about crimes against Asgard and the princes. He'd had a busy time of it since Frigga had given him his orders. He'd headed straight for the vault first, intent on dealing with the weapons there. He and Frigga were of one mind on this particular. While a few of the weapons there were usable, mostly they merely presented a threat to the realms and needed to be destroyed. Unfortunately, this was not so easy a thing to accomplish. A few of the weapons would survive even being tossed into the heart of a star, thanks to enchantments placed upon them. Of course, doing such a thing would make them far harder to access than if they were sitting in a building. The number of beings in the realms capable of withstanding such an environment, or extracting an object from such an environment from far enough away to remain unaffected, were vanishingly small. Unfortunately, Thanos was one of those that could pull it off. In the end, Tyr had opted to send the weapons he could not destroy into the heart of a star anyway. It was the best solution they had. With a number of stars available to them, the odds of anyone finding the right star were very small. It was going to have to be enough. As further insurance, Tyr did not put all the weapons in a single star, lest any one being find the cache and manage to rescue the lot in one fell swoop. That accomplished, he had visited the armory to make sure the smiths there had all they required to repair and forge armor and weapons. They'd been in need of more leather for padding, so he'd sent a large hunting party out to obtain skins. The feast that would result from such a hunt would do much to restore spirits that had flagged in the face of the Queen's dire news. With things in Asgard as settled as they could be, Tyr decided to journey to Midgard. After some small thought, he decided not to arrive in full armor, lest he alarm the warriors that Thor and Loki had taken up residence with. He opted for a scale mail shirt and leather vest, very similar in most regards to Thor's, though his lacked the metal circles and the cape. Nor did he bring his sword, settling for just a dagger since he was loath to be completely unarmed. Suitably attired, he returned to the Bifrost control room and bid Heimdall set him down on the roof of the building in which Thor and Loki now dwelled. Thor had arisen at his usual early hour. As had become his wont over the last few days, he joined Captain Rogers, also an early riser, for a friendly bout of wrestling before the compatriots all woke to break their fast. He'd encountered the captain one morning in the training facility by chance, and the captain had convinced Thor to engage in a bout. It had succeeded so well they'd agreed to continue. Thor had found the captain to be an exemplary warrior, capable of dealing with and nearly equaling Thor's strength and fighting abilities aside from the use of Mjolnir. For all his youth relative to Thor's, the captain also had far more temperance and wisdom than Thor knew himself to possess. There were few in any realm that Thor would follow without qualm, but the captain was swiftly becoming one such. Enough so that Thor had a tendency to refer to Steve by his rank as a mark of respect. It was probably somewhat petty of Thor, but he was relieved that he was not the only one to be rather obviously lost and confused when it came to Midgard in general and its culture in particular. Oh, Loki was very nearly as much at sea as Thor was, but he was far better at hiding it and far faster to adapt than Thor would ever be. The captain was far more apt to allow himself to look or sound confused and adapted more slowly than Loki did. The last stragglers, namely Tony and Bruce, had just sat down to table when Tony's mechanical marvel spoke. Sir, I am detecting energy readings consistent with the activation of the Bifrost emanating from the sky directly above the building. Beside him, Loki froze for a second before resuming his normal mien. Thor shifted to the side enough to bump shoulders with him and give him a quick supportive look. Any way of knowing if they're friendly? Tony wanted to know. Thor answered him. They must be friendly. Only Heimdall controls the Bifrost. None may use it without his leave, and I sincerely doubt he's been killed in the mere days since our visit. Not exactly what I meant, Fabio, Tony said, then indicated Loki. I'm more worried about Odin going back on his word. He would not. It may well be Mother. She did indicate a desire to visit Midgard, Thor pointed out. Right, I guess there's only one way to find out. Let's go, Tony said. Thor was rather amused when everyone made their way to the roof, each as curious as the rest as to whom their visitor might be. He was less than amused when he realized that Loki was coming remarkably close to attempting to hide behind Thor, using him as a shield. Clearly, his brother was far more worried about Asgardian visitors than Thor had initially suspected he would be. It was remarkably disconcerting to have Loki acting so, while he had ever been in favor of subtlety and striking from the shadows. This was something else entirely. When the dazzling brilliance of the Bifrost receded enough to permit him to observe who had traveled to Midgard, Thor was both mightily pleased and deeply concerned to see it was Tyr standing there. Another moment's observation cleared away the concern. Tyr was not garbed for battle, nor was he carrying weapons or chains that might indicate that Odin had indeed rescinded his decree regarding Loki. This then was either a trip regarding Thanos' impending arrival, or Tyr visiting Midgard to quench his curiosity. Much relieved, Thor greeted Tyr with his usual friendly abandon, as further indication that Tyr was not here on dire business. Tyr was as quick to greet Thor, the two men meeting in a fierce hug followed by gripping each other's forearms. Well met, my princess, Tyr said to Thor with a grin. He glanced around Thor's bulk and nodded respectively to the far less physically demonstrative Loki before he broke from Thor's grasp and offered a forearm clasp to Loki, who accepted it with a faint air of surprise. Both of ya, I bring news from Asgard and from Her Majesty the Queen. Thor was pleased that Tyr greeted Loki so. He knew that many of the people of Asgard would put all blame on Loki and treat him ill. Tyr had never been one such, but it had been possible that circumstances would change Tyr's usual approach to Loki. Tyr then turned his attention to the gathered Avengers. This must be Midgard's defenders. Rumors have been running wild in Asgard since your arrival. I was sorry to have missed it. Born laughed. He could just bet that the rumor mill had been working overtime in relation to the Avengers' visit. Mortals on Asgard were rare enough that two of them had dared to defy Odin, and one had felled a guard, would have had tongues wagging overtime. He clasped Tyr's shoulder and began to make the introductions.
My friends, this is Tyr, General of Asgard's army. Tyr, this is...
And then he named everyone. Once the introductions were complete, Tony stepped forward.
You said you had news?
He asked.
Is that just for Thor and Loki, or all of us? 'Cause if you need privacy, we can scoot, but if it's for everyone, we'll be more comfortable inside.
The news I bear is for all, Tyr said. Tony led the way inside. Thor smiled to see Tyr gazing about, curious as to their lodgings. Tyr was visibly disconcerted by the elevator, a thing which did not exist on Asgard primarily because they did not build edifices as tall as Midgardians did. While there were several floors to the palace, for instance, there were nowhere near the 100+ floors in this particular building, so finding a means to get from the bottommost floor to the topmost without exhausting oneself had never been a concern. Once they were settled on the couches on the floor used for entertainments, Tyr began his tale. I will begin by saying that all is currently well in Asgard, and your mother, the queen, in fine health. I say this because much of what I have to impart is at least somewhat alarming, Tyr told them. I do not know the full tale myself. The queen did not seem fit to enlighten me. But 3 days passed. The queen was seen riding at speed for Heimdall's control room. She returned at a far more temperate speed, and then bade that all within a feasible distance of the palace, as well as all residents of the palace, gather in the throne room 2 hours later. When that compulsory audience took place, the queen arrived in battle dress, which I know for a fact she had not possessed previously. She held Gungnir in her grasp, and Odin was nowhere to be seen, Tyr told them. Thor exchanged an alarmed glance with Loki. The two of them realized the significance of someone other than Odin bearing Gungnir. Thor's first thought was that Odin had finally resumed the interrupted Odin sleep he'd begun a year previously, but that didn't explain his mother wearing armor. Tyr was right. Frigga never had before, at least not in Thor's memory. She then proclaimed that for crimes against Asgard and her heirs, Odin had been summarily exiled and that she was assuming the throne. Thor's eyes about popped out of his head at this proclamation. He had long known that Frigga was greatly displeased with the treatment Loki endured and blamed Odin for it. She had also seen him carry out various political and battle plans, both for good and ill, but she had endured it all this long without seizing control. What in the name of the Norns could Odin have done to drive Frigga to take control? He took some small comfort from the fact that Loki seemed as confused as he was. She then revealed that the fell monster was on the move once more, Tyr said, his face twisting in distaste. Wait, you mean that Odin had not... Loki started. If Odin possessed that knowledge at any point before the Queen's audience, he did nothing, Tyr confirmed. Well, that explained the crimes against Asgard part of his mother's comment, Thor reflected. That Odin had not taken action against Thanos' renewed rise was more than reason enough to depose him. She then bade the court ambassadors to disperse to their realms, and warned their kings about Thanos, and took herself the warriors 3 and Lady Sif of the Svartalheim and Jotunheim. She bade me to ready our troops and to empty the vault and destroy those weapons which could not be safely used, and see to the dispersal amongst our troops of those that could. She also bade me to coordinate with the two of you, as you were assisting Midgard and her warriors with the preparations, and as this is the first time they have encountered the Mad Titan, and would thus be the best source of knowledge as to Midgard's defenses. Tyr sighed and then continued. I have done as the Queen commanded me thus far, with the exception of one weapon. She expressed a special interest in the casket of ancient winters, and bade that it not be destroyed or given over to anyone who might be able to control it. She expressed the possibility of returning it to Jotunheim if she could establish enough fellowship with their new king. Unfortunately, the casket was not to be found in the vault. I have wondered if either of you have seen it, or if one of the invaders that broke in on Thor's aborted coronation day might have managed to make off with it after all. For one of the few times in his life, Thor decided to tell a blatant lie. He knew from Odin, who'd seen Heimdall get frozen in his sleep, that Loki had taken the casket during his madness after the revelation of his parentage. It was far better than Thor be blamed for it. And given the situation at the time, it was even believable that he had done something. He had not been best pleased with the situation immediately after his aborted coronation. He was rather known for making rash decisions when his blood was up like that, so Tyre was unlikely to question it.
I removed it after the invasion, he claimed. I bid Loki hide it against another incursion, since the Jotuns could obviously get into the vault. I feared the appearance of a larger force that the destroyer could not defeat before one did make off with either the casket or another of the weapons there.
Tyre considered that for a moment before nodding. Rash, perhaps, but perhaps also wise, given they did indeed manage to get in there, he said, then turned his attention to Loki. If you would either tell me where it is hidden or be willing to fetch it, my prince, I would be grateful. Loki nodded. You will have it in your hands ere you return to Asgard, he told Tyre.